So a couple of updates on Diddy. We have not fully confirmed this. We are hearing that Diddy is enrolled in a domestic violence and a drug treatment program, two separate ones, while behind bars.
There was silence in the courtroom. It is a quiet that suffocates the air like a fog, suffocating every breath, rather than one that is serene or solemn. And Diddy sat motionless, his posture rigid, in the middle of that crushing silence.
Diddy is behind bars, but he is enrolled in two classes in jail. A class for drug abuse and one for domestic violence.
Domestic violence. These are programs that are offered by the federal government in the prison system for inmates, and he is enrolled in both of these programs. He's also, we're told, in therapy separate from those two programs. And all of these things that he's doing, typically for one reason, to look good for the judge.
Well, it's important because sentencing comes up October 3rd. And Diddy, look, everything that I know tells me that he will get between 1 and 2 years. And I think it's going to be closer to 1. Prosecution is asking for 4. That's just not going to happen for a Mann Act violation. So if that's right, look, he wants to get the lowest he can get, and I think it's going to be between that 1 and 2 range. To get the 1, I think he's got to show the judge that he is taking his misdeeds seriously.
Right. And by the way, we know that even when the judge said that he was not going to let him out on bail pending sentencing, one of the things he mentioned was his violence. We've seen his violence.
Exactly.
So he knows that this is an issue for the judge.
And the defense conceded it.
Right. So that's something he definitely has to address. And that's what he's doing with this program.
Charles, he doesn't have to address it, but he is addressing it. And, this might help him with regards to his sentence. Maybe the judge might sentence him to lesser time because he's working on himself.
But Jamie, you know what the complication here is that he's been found not guilty on the charges that relate to drug use and domestic violence. That there was no conviction using force, fraud, or coercion in these 3 ways, and drugs. The Cassie video was off the table. The only thing he's been convicted of is taking a prostitute across state lines for the purpose of prostitution.
But can't the judge consider all of the testimony in the that was presented at the trial?
But the defense is going to say he was found not guilty on those things. So it's really kind of an interesting...
There's that, but there's another side of this. And Jamie, you've been working on this story for 5 days now to lock this down. But there was one key word that one of the sources you spoke to. You remember what that word was?
Yeah, redemption.
Yeah, because that's the other part of this. Yeah. That this is Diddy looking at my life after prison. Because now that he knows he's not going to be locked away for decades, not going to be locked away for the rest of his life.
As though he was still struggling to comprehend the significance of what he had just heard, his gaze was fixed on the judge. This was not meant to be the final chapter. Not for him, not for the man who once sat atop a throne of platinum albums and sinister secrets and dominated the music industry like a king. Many of you have been curious in what I use on my skin. I'm 41 years old, a mother of 2, and people frequently ask me how I manage to have such vitality and bright skin. In addition to not having time for self-care during the day, I don't follow 10-step regimens. I do, however, consume these Goli superfruit candies. They are rich in vitamins A, C and E, as well as bamboo shoot extract, which promotes the synthesis of collagen, skin suppleness, and the desired healthy glow. My skin appears brighter, feels smoother, and, to be honest, I simply feel more assured. The best part is that they taste fantastic, are gluten-free and vegan, and they also make me feel good. The description contains links. For speedy delivery, use Amazon, or use the code cellophane to get it from Goli's website. However, everything he believed he had buried came tumbling through the courthouse doors as the gavel descended, and he eventually snapped when the judge gave out the lengthy, icy, and heartbreaking prison sentence. I don't mean to yell at the sky in a theatrical manner. It was more dramatic and nuanced. the sort of fracture that appears to be the spirit of a person separating from their body. He had more than watery eyes. They were deserted, as if everything that gave him the feeling of invincibility had just been torn apart in public. Karma and balance finally catching up are topics of conversation, and here it was not as a whisper, but as the complete fall of a shadow-based kingdom. The jury had returned a divided verdict.
Hearing today? Sort of. We got to talk about why. Well, Judge Arun Subramanian had sent a tentative October 3rd sentencing date for Diddy on his convictions of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Remember, that's what he was convicted of. He was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy, and he was acquitted of the 2 sex trafficking counts, but he was convicted of these prostitution charges. And at one point, there was reporting that defense counsel for Sean Combs and prosecutors, they had then agreed to switch the date to September 22nd. And we thought, okay, because today's hearing was supposed to be about expediting the October hearing. Then they agreed to September 22nd. Now apparently it's back to October 3rd. This is all over the place. Very confusing. We'll get it straightened out. I gotta say it's interesting because Combs' defense counsel had originally stated last week, when it was the October 3rd date, that they wanted that sentencing expedited, meaning they wanted it to happen sooner. And one of the things that Sean Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo, had said was, quote, the mother of some of his children had passed away many years ago. These kids, the 2 daughters here sitting in the middle of Your Honor's second row, don't have a parent. Obviously referring to the death of Kim Porter in 2018, mother of Christian, Jesse, Delilah, Quincy. And by the way, remember Sean Combs was denied bail, so it wasn't even like he got to go home after the verdict. But clearly they wanted this expedited. They want his sentencing to happen as quickly as possible. They want him out of jail. They want him out of prison as soon as possible. And also it's interesting because prosecutors, they need time for the pre-sentencing investigation and report. Basically, that's when a probation officer interviews the defendant, looks at the history, the background, childhood, education, employment, criminal history, finances, the mental and physical health of the defendant. There are interviews that are conducted with family and friends. The officer looks at various court and school records, employment records, financial records. The officer could speak to the victims in the case, law enforcement that were involved in the investigation, provide all of this information in a report to the judge, because here the judge is going to have a lot of discretion when it comes to the sentence. What could a sentence look like? Well, prosecutors indicated in a filing that before even doing a pre-sentencing investigation, Combs is looking at 51 to 63 months, a little over 4 to 5 years in prison. The defense seems to be pushing for 21 to 27 months, so a little over 1.5 to 2 years. But remember, Combs has been sitting in federal lockup since September at the MDC. So if he gets time served, he really wouldn't be spending that much time behind bars. Now, of course, there are the extremes. When you talk about transportation to engage in prostitution, the maximum for each count is 10 years in prison. You stack them together, you get 20 years. Okay, based upon the facts in this case, it seems highly unlikely he would get that much. Other side, you get the idea. There's no minimum for this charge. So could he get time served and walk free? Also seems unlikely in that you're dealing with multiple.
Some of the most spectacular charges were not proven true, but enough were that the punishment imposed was harsh. Furthermore, the length of the punishment did not generate a gasp in the courtroom. The judge didn't hold back, and it gasped. No grace, no pity, and no celebrity privilege were present. Diddy was told that once the facade falls apart, neither fame nor wealth can keep you safe, and it crumbled. What had been whispers in the business became terrifying confirmations. After weeks of dramatic testimony, after entering the courtroom, witness after witness pulled back the curtain. The parties, the manipulation, the dread, and the coercion. Once written off as tabloid fluff, these stories were now being revealed under oath, under the chilly, fluorescent lights of a courtroom where platinum plaques couldn't be used to cover up the past. Then came the pivotal moment. Diddy's demise was not sealed by a smoking gun or secret video. It was the unvarnished, trembling voice of a former acquaintance, someone who had previously profited from the empire but was unable to remain silent. It wasn't only testimony from that voice. It allowed the jury to see a side of a world that most people had only dreamed of.
It was an interesting argument because that who would monitor him. It was interesting because the prosecution at one point had said it's not fair, right? He's a wealthy celebrity who's providing a bail package that other people in a similar position wouldn't be able to provide. Now the defense was like, well, the only reason we're presenting a package like this is because of what he's accused of and his wealth and his resources. We have to address that in a certain way. The reason it's so extensive is because of his wealth and resources. That bail package that was put forward was rejected by the court. What did you make of that?
Well, at that time, the judge was looking at the RICO Act and sex trafficking. So, Puffy was looking at possibly 25 years, or more, depending on what the guidelines were based on if he was convicted. So at 55 years old, at that time, it's almost a life sentence. So, and he has a lot of wealth and he had a private plane. So the judge was looking at that. Plus, in the federal system, they look at danger to the community. Where in the state system, they're not allowed to look at that. They look at risk of flight. So I think with all the letters behind that were coming in that we were not really privy to from a lot of the alleged victims, I think the judge made a decision that, hey, this is not going to be sufficient enough. I thought that at the end, he kind of, when we brought it on our private security team and we showed him who was going to be doing it, we did Sam Bankman-Fried. So we knew that, we would be completely covered on that end. And we gave him the idea of there would be no Wi-Fi in the building that we were looking at, and that he would not be able to really be able to connect with anybody but his legal team and his family. We thought at that point that maybe we had a chance, but at the end, the judge denied it, and that's where we stood. And now on this case coming forward, after the convictions, after he wasn't convicted, at the end, we didn't know what he was going to do. So, when Mark reached out to me afterwards, we started thinking about putting another bail package together.
And what is that bail package and by the way, is this a bail package that you think could be submitted again, even after the judge just denied bail?
Well, the judge denied bail based on the statute, and the statute stated a certain amount of information that part of the Mann Act that, was not eligible for bail. There are certain circumstances that can be done. We're going to regroup again. I know that they were going to go talk to Mr. Combs again and see what happens there. They have the October 3rd date. And I don't know where he stood. As of the other day, he wanted to get out. I don't think anybody wants to be at NBC where he is. So we're going to reconvene and see what happens, at a later date. We could go back with another package. Would
it require him to stay in New York? Would it be him to be, I know he wanted to go back to his property in Miami, Florida. And there's also an interesting question, I think, that his defense put forward.
Power was more intoxicating than anything offered on the street or in nightclubs, and the world behind the velvet ropes was a place where the rules didn't apply. Diddy made an effort to remain calm. He sat there stoic on the outside day after day while damaging detail after damning detail came forth into the room. You could see it gnawing at him inside, though his jaw was tense and his foot thumped uneasily under the table. He believed he could overcome it. He believed that the influence, the attorneys, the money, and the system would hold the line. However, the room transformed after the jury returned. The air changed in some way. People could sense it even before the four spoke. Then the words appeared, "I feel guilty." He is facing enough charges to keep him in prison for years or even decades. But he was broken by more than simply the sentence. It was the speed. The judge did not stop to catch his breath, refused to let the shock wear off. The sentence hit like a freight train as soon as the verdict was confirmed. It all fell apart at that very instant. Diddy sagged his shoulders, he lowered his head, and he appeared little for the first time, as if the legendary figure who had ruled stages and headlines for decades had finally been reduced to a mere man with burdensome responsibilities. His legal team appeared stunned and stunned behind him. They had relied on reputation, appeals, and weaknesses. They were aware that this was more than a simple loss, though. There was a message. The judge's remarks were more scathing than the actual sentence. Your decisions were not excused by your influence.
He was the IMF, president, and nobody knew if he was on his way going back to Greece to lend him X amount of money to get him out of trouble. Yet we had to find him an apartment in the city. We had to get him private security. I was dealing with his ex-wife now, coming in and giving me what I need to put a $5 million bail together. So, they're a little more demanding, and everybody's looking to me to make that, make it happen. The lawyer could get the bail, but at the end of the day, it's Ira Jettleson that's running in, putting everything together, and the pressure. And I work in chaos all day long. That's my life. So, when it comes to chaos, that's my specialty.
You handle it well though. You handle it quite well, given the chaos.
I have to.
Yeah.
If as I said before, if I want to, have a nice home, I want my kids to go to college, I want things to happen. You got to do these things, and people rely on you.
Absolutely, and I think there's something to be said here, and it's important that you said it. Your reputation's on the line. So the idea of when we say, nebulous, how can we trust a private security team? I'm happy you clarified that. I want to get really practical here, realistically.
Sure,
Sean
yes.
Combs is released on bail. Okay, let's say he's released. He's home confinement. What exactly is he allowed to do and not to do? Is he really there's someone's going to be watching him 24/7? They're going to make sure he has no iPad, no iPhone. Can he give directions to people like associates or other people that are involved? I mean, the concern, of course, is that even if he's out and he's around people, he can still shake things up a little bit. He can still get messages out. I guess the question is, what does it realistically look like for him? Does he sit in a room? Does he only confined to certain rooms day in and day out? Is he constantly watched on tape and all of his electronic devices are searched on him constantly? I mean, what does it look like?
Well, again, it's really up to the restrictions of the court.
Sure.
I have people out right now that are on ankle bracelets, and they can't go 400 feet. They can go 800 feet. They can go wherever, depending on what the restrictions are. In Puffy's case, the way we were putting it to the judge and to the Southern District was, we were going to have a call log, so you could see who his calls were going to. We were going to try to take away his Wi-Fi in the building, which would have been a lot easier. We would have limited the people that would come see him. So at the end of the day, we had cameras inside the apartment that we were going to do, which our people were going to put up. And we were going to all let the government be able to get into that system to see who was coming in and out. Of course, there's privacy. So, we were going to make it very, very tight. Now, when you're incarcerated, and I have a lot of friends that I know that that are incarcerated. When people come to see you, if you want to pass a message, messages can get passed. We know that. So if he really wanted to do something incarcerated, he might be able to. If he really wanted to do something when he was out, he might be able to. I don't think that he would take a chance on something like that to risk what he's gone through over the last year. Again, opinion on my end, based on being 30 years in the industry, you just got possibly your life back. You were facing 30 years incarcerated possibly, and now you're going to take a chance on something like that. But again, no, I'm not in someone's brain. I can't determine how people think. There's a lot of people that feel they're above the law. So I don't know how Puffy thinks.
Your actions were not absolved by your celebrity. Additionally, this courtroom does not follow industry norms. Icy, exact, and unforgiving. The sort of message that ensured the audience wouldn't see the result as leniency. The public's responses came immediately. Social media took off. The fact that Diddy had been jailed genuinely shocked half the world. The other half yelled that it was still insufficient. Some lamented the demise of a one-side dealized mogul. Justice finally caught up to a man who had evaded responsibility for far too long, and others rejoiced. The internet became a battlefield of opinion, memory, and reckoning as celebrities shared cryptic stories and subtweets flew. There was 50 Cent after that. He did not remain mute, as was to be expected. His post appeared on Instagram just hours after the ruling. One picture of a throne in disarray. No caption. He didn't require one. Everyone was aware. He had pointed fingers, pushed, shaded, and hinted for years. He had nothing more to prove now. He saw the last curtain fall, the man who had foreseen it all, the ghost in the background. In the courtroom, however, Diddy was not considering rival insults or memes. He remained stunned. The reality struck him like a brick wall as the base proceeded to take him into custody right away. There would be no going out that door, no going back to the mansion, and no news release about damage control. The chains had ceased to be symbolic. They gave each other a clink. They locked, and he took a moment to look back as they carried him away. Perhaps instinctively, perhaps incredulously, but nobody looked him in the eye. Not his attorneys, not the journalists, not the crowd of onlookers who had formerly sang his praises. There was nothing but silence. The type that remains when the door closes behind you. And it was just the beginning for Diddy.